Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Hello everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Let's start our today's discussion. Today we are going to discuss what is foreign policy, and we will be discussing its definition, factors affecting the foreign policy of any nation, what is the importance of foreign policy, what are the tools used for the implementation of foreign policy, and what are the stages for the making of foreign policy of any country or nation. Let's move on. First, we are going to start with the definition of foreign policy. So the most simplest definition of a foreign policy is that it is a goals and strategies that guide a state's relationship with other states. That's the most simplest concept of the foreign policy. It's a policy used by sovereign states to interact with other sovereign states. So it is a policy tool for one nation to interact with the other nation, how it wants to establish a relationship with other state. So the definition according to the Field Marshal Muhammad Ayub Khan, the foreign policy of a country is in a sense projection of its internal policies, social, political and economic. So it's the internal projection on the outside world according to Muhammad Ayub Khan. So foreign policy changes according to the political environment of global politics, and we will see it in the next slide that how foreign policy is affected by the different factors, and it changes with the political environment at the current situation. Let's move on. The factors that affect the implementation of foreign policy are its geography, where the country is located. It affects how the country is going to relate with the other nations. Either it have mountainous protection around itself, or it have a sea boundary attached to it. So it will affect how it is being connected and related with other nations, and its importance changes with its geography, as we have seen in the current arena. Another factor that affects the foreign policy of any nation is the economic power, how wealthy a nation is, and the economic power affects how it is going to relate with other nations. If it's too powerful economically, then it will influence the foreign policy of other nations. That's the benefit of economic power. Another factor that affects the foreign policy is power structure, how the world states align with each other. Either it's unipolar, multipolar, bipolar. This structure affects the foreign policy. Another factor is ethnic and cultural ties. Ethnic and cultural ties are usually with the neighbors. It can be with the other countries as well, but they are usually with the neighbors, and they affect how they relate with each other. That's another factor that affects the foreign policy. Let's move on. So what's the importance of foreign policy? Well, there is a lot of importance of foreign policy. I have listed few important points of the importance of foreign policy. Let's start to discuss them. A foreign policy should protect the territorial integrity of the country and both protect the interests of its citizens both within and outside the country. So it protects the territorial integrity of any nation. It makes it completely protected from other states' aggression. The foreign policy of a country should seek to promote further its national interest of the country. So it is furthering its national interest. What is it want to achieve in the future or in the present time. The foreign policy should aim at the promotion of economic interests of the country. So what are the interests of a country? They are mostly the economic interest. Through economic power, all the other interests are attached with each other. and through economic power all these interests are gained. So what's the tool of foreign policy? How the foreign policy is implemented in the global arena? So there I have listed a few of the important tools. One is defense. So defense or military discourages aggression from another country or another state. It is a very helpful tool for the protection of any country. It is basically protecting the internal side of a state from the external threat. Another tool is alliances. So alliances are the combination of military forces to create a strong military power. So they are formed together to protect each other. Like the alliance that is coming in my mind is of NATO. It's a military alliance for the protection of the countries that are in the alliance. Diplomacy is relations and communication between two or more countries. So it is basically the formal communication between two countries. Foreign aid is giving military or economic aid to another countries. Like in the 19th century or in the 20th century, after the second world war, the Marshall Plan was started for the rebuilding of Europe. Trade measures are basically the policies used for economically making the state powerful. Intelligence can be used as gaining information about another country and changing its stance according to that. So these are the following tools of foreign policy. Let's move on to the stages of foreign policy setting. So the first stage is agenda setting. So what can be the agenda that is to be fulfilled? What is the interest that wants to be fulfilled? First of all, the problem and issue is being discussed. The problem that arises and needs to be addressed. That will shift the point of focus towards a particular issue. Then the formulation part comes in. It is the possible policies and are created and debated. So the possibilities, the ways forward are being discussed, and then the adoption. Government adopts one policy, what it wants to pursue. Then the implementation parts come in. So appropriate way is decided to implement the policy, how they are going to implement this policy, and they have the following tools that we discussed in the previous slide. So how they are going to implement the foreign policy. Then the evaluation parts comes in. Evaluation is done through officials and judges and through intelligence community, how the policy is performing, how the world is looking at the state, and what they predicted about the policy impact. So that was the stages of foreign policy setting. So that was all. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.